Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host Dan Maisie dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. Today, we're diving into the world of sports, sponsorship and challenge events with Penny Betts, Chief Client Officer at Threshold Sports. Penny's journey in the sports and events industry has been nothing short of remarkable. At Threshold Sports, she has played a pivotal role in transforming the company into a leading force in creating extraordinary outdoor challenges for people of all abilities. Her expertise isn't just confined to event management. Penny has a rich background in sponsorship and sports marketing, having managed the Chelsea FC sponsorship strategy and activation in the UK for Samsung Electronics, along with their Olympic sponsorship activation. Penny's dynamic career has also included impactful roles at Diageo, where she managed sponsorship and experiential marketing within the music festival scene and with music promoters for iconic brands like Pimm's and Guinness. Penny's leadership and strategic vision in fostering partnerships and managing accounts has not only elevated Threshold Sports, but have also left a lasting impact on the sports and entertainment industry. Her ability to navigate the challenging terrain of job search and recruitment within these sectors offers invaluable insights for anyone looking to stand out. And I, for one, can't wait to delve into the insights she has to offer. Penny, welcome to Talent Talks.
Oh, thank you very much. Can I have that little paragraph? I'll put it on my LinkedIn.
Yes, I should say that at the start of every single podcast because a lot of people say that. I'm quite proud of the little intros that we do. It makes everybody a bit happier, which is great. Let's get straight into it. We ask this to each of our guests to begin with. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired, and do you have any lessons learned?
Oh, yes. So I don't think I've been hired for 13 years now because I've been within Threshold for that long. And actually, different to Diageo, as I've moved through the different roles at Threshold, there wasn't a formal interview process every time you move through the roles either. So I would say I think I'm probably a bit out of the picture in terms of what it feels like to be a candidate with my CV in a pile of lots of others. But I have spent a long time over the last 13 years developing a way in which we want to treat our candidates and how we want to attract the best talent. And a few years back, Threshold, as it was growing from 3 people to 10 people to now we're sort of 29, 30, we had to develop a people strategy. And one of those pillars was all about attracting top talent. And one of those things is really not just about how we write CVs, but how we treat our candidates, how they feel through the interview process, how we train our interviewers to actually ask really insightful questions and not just let everyone just run off and do their best. So we've really tried to create a proper structure around that because we know getting the right people into Threshold is absolutely crucial, especially when you're a small business. The wrong hire can have a really, really big impact on the team.
That's really interesting. And you're the first guest that's come on that has said anything about training for interviewers. We've had a lot of people on, and that's a question that I've asked is, has there been any training for you as an interviewer when you began through the process? So it's really interesting to hear that you've put that in place at Threshold. What does that look like? How does that play out with the people that you're training?
So, in fact, we put a whole training course, a set of modules. We've got about 25 modules that we've put together at Threshold, and every single member of staff will go through that through the year, and it will get repeated or refined each year. There's a section of training modules which is all around line management, but interviewing forms part of that. The training is literally normally somebody within the business who has written a module or two and drawn some research and obviously experience. And we've drawn that into a set of resources, which we now keep on our kind of group server. And we go through these as well in proper sort of practical sessions with the line managers or anyone who wants to hire. The training starts with how to write the correct job spec. We've seen so many times where you're trying to hire an account executive into a sports role or client management role, and you read the job spec and they're asking for Superman or Superwoman, but they want everything, but actually this person might only need 1 or 2 years experience. So the training starts with making sure their job spec is asking for what's really, really important. And we've developed these capabilities, these set of core competencies, which are all written up. And we asked our team to really look at the set of core competencies. There's 8 main headings, and then underneath that, there's kind of some subheadings, and they have to really pick out maybe 4 or 5 things that's really important to that role and feed that into the job spec. And then what I expect is then for the interviewer, somebody in our team, to be asking the questions specifically around those competencies. So it's, of course, we do chats about how are you and what lovely experience you've had, but actually to make sure we're getting to the nub of what we need for that role starts with job spec, and then it starts with the capabilities and the interviewing. And as part of the resources we have written out probably 8 to 10 questions which you can ask around each competency. So it's all there in black and white. Anyone who goes into an interview should have their prep done. They should know what questions will give them the right sort of answers. And then therefore they should have a good way to kind of assess one candidate versus another.
It's a very thorough and quite impressive way of doing it. The competencies, are they skill based or are they value based, or are they kind of a mix of both?
A real mix. So there might be things like communication skills or leadership. There's a broad range, and actually you can look at them up on Google, and you can find all sorts of brilliant resources there if you're stuck, or if you don't have this all passed down for you, or you're a startup trying to create your own. So there's loads of stuff online that can really help drive you to sort of create the right competencies for your business. But yeah, definitely we are looking at functional skills as well as leadership ones. And all the subheadings below each title will kind of delve into those things a little bit more specifically.
I think it's really interesting because I think you mentioned it at the beginning. As a small business, if you get a hire wrong, it can be kind of catastrophic. And I think being able to put in place such a robust structure behind it is something that is genuinely really kind of impressive. And I think that's not necessarily seen in a lot of other places that might be a bit bigger, and trying to be as diplomatic as possible here. And one of the roles I've hired for in the past, the job was, or the process was, I should say, here's the old job description, add digital to a couple of things and then chuck it out. And it's like, well, you're not getting the right person. And then that goes to the recruitment agency that was working for us at the time, which means that you're even further removed from the process of getting the right people in. And it takes a lot longer, in my opinion, and a lot less efficient to get the right person in if you do that. I want to go back to something you said again during the first answer, and that was around taking care of the candidate. I think it's a real fundamental thing that we need to be doing a lot more of in the sports industry, is making sure that our candidates are taken care of. What approach do you take to make sure that that is at the forefront?
It's absolutely critical to our values. So it starts with the values of our company, the values of Threshold. One of them is decency. So actually the decency value is one of the top things we look for when we're trying to interview people, and how we ask questions about how they've dealt with difficult challenges. So decency sits at the very, very heart of how we want to treat our clients, our partners, our sponsors, our participants, and our staff. That means, in short terms, in terms of the recruitment process, we should be dealing with anyone who applies or has taken the time out to write an application to join Threshold, should be dealt with thanks, and also be given swift and prompt answers as to when they're going to hear from us. And also, if they haven't been successful, just a very polite email that's not automated, if possible, but has a personal touch. The further that along they go, i.e. the more effort they give us through various interviews or assessments, or however we're dealing with that specific role, they would get a little bit more from us. So if someone has spent, they've got round to the second round and they weren't successful, we would make sure we give them some really poignant feedback, and not just palmed off saying someone else had some more experience than you did, but actually try and give them some really real life examples of perhaps where they missed the mark, or what we'd like to see more of. And they can do with that what they will. Lots of people have asked for phone feedback, to have a chat with the interviewer, which I'd always be happy to do, just because that's how I'd want to be treated myself if I've given a whole load of effort. And of course, there's time limitations on how much you can give candidates of your time, and you need to move on with your hiring process and running your teams and things. But where we can, we just try and make it as personal as possible to that person. And the reason being is because we've had feedback from people that have actually joined our team and may have been through quite a rigorous process, and may also have been applying for jobs elsewhere at the same time. And this actually happened very recently with our new hire of our CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, who said actually one of the key things that made him choose Threshold over the other role he was offered was how our office manager dealt with him. That was setting up the meetings. That was the tone of her emails. It was this promptness of how we were responding to him as a candidate. So it can really make or break things in terms of how the candidates see us, but also obviously how we see them too.
I think how the candidates see you is a really interesting point of view, because I also think there are people there that might not be appropriate for a role now, but might be really good for a role that could come up in a couple of months or whatever that is. And if the process hasn't been very good initially, they're not going to come back in and apply for it, because they're not going to want to work for a company that doesn't have a good interview process, because what does that look like behind the scenes? And similarly with people that you even offer the job to, there's going to be something there that thinks, well, actually, this has been a pretty shit process.
Yeah.
How is that going to affect my time at the company? And I suppose it's interesting to hear the fact that you've got actual proper feedback certainly from a senior member as well as junior members that have come in and said that this is the reason why. Have you had any experiences where you've done all of this, you clearly have such a rigorous and structured interviewing hiring process, where you have ultimately got the wrong person in, and it might be wrong, it's going to be wrong for you, it's going to be wrong for them at the same time? And how have you kind of dealt with that situation?
Oh, we've got it wrong so many times. We get wowed by, we get wowed by certain expertise that we haven't had in the past, or we get wowed by people who might be bringing something new that we really think, that we're all kind of doubting ourselves that we've got within the team currently. But I mean, there's a few things that I think about getting it wrong. It's okay. I mean, it's okay to get hires wrong, because actually normally it's the person who's been hired into the business that realizes that sooner than the company does. I'd like to know, I always sort of treat our probation periods as a moment where, I explain it to our candidates. This isn't just us looking at you, this is you looking at us. And there's absolutely no joy in having the wrong person in the wrong role. It's just dreadful for everyone, including the candidates. So, we always have an open conversation about those sorts of things. It's very funny when you're hiring to replace somebody as well, because I think what you tend to do is you hire people that fill the gap that the previous person didn't quite have. So almost you overcompensate. And actually, that probably isn't necessarily needed. So somebody might leave a role who was kind of lacking a whole load of technical expertise in digital marketing, let's say. And then you go out and find, well, what we need is definitely someone who's got a ton of that. And actually, it doesn't matter about the leadership stuff or the people stuff, because we just were really missing that in the last role. And then so you start bouncing around in this kind of strange way. So yeah, we've definitely got hires wrong. In terms of how we deal with it, I've talked about kind of those open conversations that we have through our probation and beyond. But also we listen to our team, because they are the real temperature checks here for us. If the team aren't happy with a particular hire, they often talk about it or say something. And our experience is to really listen to that, especially for people who are in, the leadership roles that are having real big impact on a small team. If that's not right, your team will normally speak up and they will call it. And culturally as well, especially when you're a small business, you can't hide. You really stand out, and you've got to get the mix of personalities and the diversity you're looking for right to get the best performing teams. So I think for us here at Threshold, where we're looking for people that are really expressing our values and live our values, it really matters to us. And if somebody's just not quite got that, and we've not managed to interview that or see that as well as we would hope, and it doesn't work out, that's really impactful for us. And we'd normally have that conversation with those people. But as I said, they've normally realised it maybe before we have.
Yeah. I think if it's a mistake on a skill element, that's something that can be easily learned and easily taught. If it's a mistake on a values and a cultural piece, it might take a couple of months afterwards for the candidate to really realise, but actually they will go, it wasn't the right place for me. It wasn't the right match for how I want to work as much as it. And you're completely right. It kind of fits both ways. Talk about the emphasis you clearly place on the team dynamics and how they run the interview processes and how they do the interviewing. How much do you and the other senior execs step into the interview process? Are you still an active part of it? Do you just go, you know what, we will have a look at the very end but we trust your judgment? Or how does that kind of work in terms of the leadership team?
I would say I pile in a lot quicker than probably the other three senior leadership team members that we've got running the business, mainly because I look after our people strategy and the people function. I am a big one for culture, so I actually love interviewing people. I absolutely love finding out about what makes them tick, more so than what expertise they've got. I start digging around people's worlds, what makes them happy, what really going to make them smile when they come into work, what makes them laugh, what's their best night out. Kind of let me get a real picture of what they are like. And we've got some very strange questions we ask people here at Threshold, like what's their favourite fancy dress, or what might they order at a bar. And we just have a bit of a laugh, try and relax that person. Because as I said, cultural fit is really, really important to us. We think we're brilliant trainers at the functional piece of our job. So actually what we do here, and I've just been doing it all week actually, is doing screening interviews, 15-minute quick check-ins to see if I can get to the root of that person quickly. And then if I think they're a goer, we then send them through to the more structured, longer interviews where we'll dig around all those capabilities I mentioned before. And we found that really works. And all of our leadership team will get involved if it's the role within their team where we'll do those screening interviews really quickly. And then if our team then start, the actual hiring managers start with the longer interviews, there might be one or two different longer interviews that candidate goes through. And then I might be brought in at the end if they really like someone to sit in on one of those interviews. So yeah, we're definitely involved. We definitely want to know about the person, not just what clients they've worked on or how brilliant they are at Excel. Like, we want to know far more about that person. And we've always said within our team, if you come out of an interview and they tick the boxes, the final question is, do you want to sit next to them at a dinner party?
Good question.
And that's normally the mic drop moment. It's a yes or no. Let's go for them.
I think thinking back, I think if I'd have asked that question on a number of occasions, I probably wouldn't have made the same hire. But let's not go into that. On that though, it does bring up the question of, you are not hiring for friends. You're hiring for people that can put the business into a better position in the years down the road and in the future. How do you ensure that you're matching the culture, you're matching the values, but you are also bringing in some diversity, something different, and not necessarily somebody that's combative, but somebody that isn't afraid to say, actually, I don't think this is a good idea. Let's look at it this way.
It's a really good question. I think this is a challenge for lots of businesses to see how they can not be stagnant with their team, how they can be as diverse as possible, how they can be attracting people within their team that complement each other rather than they're all the same. At a short level, sort of at a more granular level, we do this MBTI questionnaire on all the people that are within our team. So we actually know a little bit about what personality types they are. And obviously, we're aiming for a mix of types. And certainly at our senior leadership team level, where we're looking for the real kind of people leaders, visionary people, we can't all be the same type either. We also need a mix. So within the four of us, there's three guys and myself. We all at the moment, we're all very complementary of each other's personality types and bring very different things. I think when we're looking for those bigger hires, and like you say, people who are going to take the business to the next level, we go out to our networks. We rely a lot on word of mouth and recommendations, and we use LinkedIn. But actually, what we find is we tend to hire through recommendations. They seem to be more successful for us, hires, rather than just sort of a random collection of CVs. And I'm sure that's because, there's an element of trust there around the network, and we feel like people will understand what the role is requiring. But I think it's important to keep looking beyond the sports industry. I think you've touched on this already, and looking for people that can think differently, but without upsetting the apple cart, because there's so many good things in the business already. And in terms of sport, of course, I believe that there's lots of jobs. Lots of people want to get into sport. They especially in the sort of senior levels. I think people kind of have been doing investment banking or law for a long time and have wondered what suddenly that they're bored of that kind of culture and they want to go and do something that they love doing as a hobby, running or cycling, which is what we do as our job. So we get lots of CVs of people who could be bringing some incredible experience across. And I think we should always be open to that. People who've got some fantastic training from some other corporations or other businesses that can certainly help the stage of business that we're at, which is, growing. We're up to 30 and hopefully we'll grow some more. So yeah, it certainly doesn't need to be people who've done the same stuff as us for 13 years like me.
I think you're right. I think there's ultimately, I spoke to someone the other week who was 25 years in retail and at a very senior level when he left in order to get into sport. And he was struggling because he didn't have that specific sports experience. But it's exactly as you say there's somebody there that can come in. And if, for example, you work for a rights holder and you have a retail shop, there is somebody there that is going to have an infinite amount more experience in a much more global potentially role that could completely transform what you're doing. And I think there are the forward looking organizations, and I think that more and more of those are coming out in terms of how people are approaching their hiring and their recruitment, because they realize that it's a competitive industry sport. Agencies, rights holders, everyone's competing against each other, so you need the best people in to come in and try and help that along for you from the bottom up as well, because you want to bring those people in. You want those people that come in at account exec level or account manager level and are in the industry for 13, 14 years, because you've got that deep knowledge as well. But you also need somebody to come in and go, actually, let's look at how that could change.
Absolutely. And we've also at Threshold we've had non-exec directors from all sorts of parts of the investment world or sporting world or FMCG world who have all helped advise our leadership team as well. So from a leadership perspective, we're great as a team of four, but we draw in insights and knowledge and strategic direction from people who are outside of our business. And that's really, really crucial to us. I'll just make a little point around sport as well. And this actually refers more to the junior roles. So I've interviewed an awful lot of people who are trying to get into sport or say they absolutely love sport. And Threshold specifically are around endurance sport. So we're out in the fields, we're in tents, getting up at 5 a.m. We're starting ultra marathons up at six in the morning, and people are running 100 kilometers, and they're finishing exhausted in tears. And it's a real sense of achievement for those people. Their families come down. It's a real celebration at the end, but it's a very personal achievement. Some of the events we put on, it's very different to being desperate to be holding up the Football World Cup and standing in a stadium where there's a huge amount of, the fans are going wild and you're all the glamour and the glitz and the photography and stuff. So I always do say, look, I know you love sport, but what sort of sport do you love? Do you realise that you'll be in high vis vests here, supporting random runners that you won't know, that aren't famous, achieving things? So even if they've done sport, they still might not be right for that sporting company. And that's where you're digging around the value piece again. So, they could actually come from anywhere, but if their values support that kind of, people achieving things they never expected to be able to achieve for themselves, and that's a real driver for you, then whether or not you like football or cricket or basketball is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point. Penny, I'm conscious of time and we're about to run out of it. So before we do, we've got the last 3 quick fire questions that we ask every guest. So we will get cracking into those. The first one, what is your most frustrating thing about recruitment?
Oh, I've got loads, but my top, if I can I give you two?
No,
It's
indeed, yeah.
obviously chat GBT written cover letters.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is someone who goes through the job recruitment process, applies for a job, and then they've never been serious about taking it.
Yeah,
So you get to
yeah,
the job offer and then they don't take it. Huge disappointment.
yeah. We could spend a lot of time on both of those things, but let's move on. You don't have to name them, but also you're more than welcome to. Who has been the best hire for you and why?
So I'd love to mention them, but perhaps I shouldn't. But I think the best hire has got to be when you bring someone on because you spot their potential before they've spotted it, and they get the role and they absolutely start flying through the business at the rate of knots. So they've taken themselves by surprise. So I think that is for me the best hire that I could ever be, is when you really find the right job for someone and you've opened the door for them to be absolutely brilliant.
Love that. And then final thing, what is the one thing you would change about the recruitment world?
I wish people would always publish their salary bands.
Transparency. Yep, that's a regular
Transparency.
one. Yes. Again, if we had an extra couple of hours, I think we could dive into pretty much everything you've said there in quite a lot of detail. But
I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more as well, which again, it's just it's trying to help efficiency and it's trying to stop the time wasting. But for people to read the job spec and apply if they believe that they hit 80% of what's been asked for. And I would encourage more women to believe in themselves, that they can do most of what's on a job spec. Men tend to apply when they think they can do 50%. Women will only apply if they think they can do 100%. So I would say take a good look at the job spec, match it up to you. Don't apply if it's way off, but do apply if you think you're nearly there.
Let's touch on it quickly, but there have been studies into the gender element of that, which I find fascinating. But I think there's also candidates expect the company to pay attention and to care. There is also an expectation really should be on the candidate to make sure that they are making the right effort to identify the right job. And I couldn't agree more. But again, we need to stop now, otherwise we can just keep talking. Penny, it's been really, really appreciated. I think there's a lot of things that people can take away from this chat, and it's been fascinating. So thank you again for your time, and thanks for coming on Talent Talk.
Total pleasure. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Angie, thanks now. Bye-bye.